Achewillow, Season 4, Chapter 6. What the? It doesn't get easier. It's a good thing, though, isn't it? There are things you just shouldn't get used to. Things that should remain jarring and always leave fresh new scars, never blurring into one another to vanish over time. Then again, wouldn't it be nice if it could get easier? Let it all mix into an indistinguishable mess. Like a spice dropped into a sauce, its essence remaining as a subtle aftertaste, but the details of its identities erased. Wouldn't it be nice if, after seeing a dead body, I could just shrug it off instead of knowing, with absolute certainty, that my sleep will be plagued with nightmares? I suppose that any spice, no matter how subtle, will have its impact on the stomach no matter what. I recognize her now. Nancy Tripoli, the girl who ordered a non-fat half-calf mocha Valencia at the Achewillow Cafe. Now what? Stephane asks. The phone is still in my hand, casting its blue glow on the side of my leg. It's been there since I hung up. Or was it them that hung up? I can't remember. We do as Jacinth told us. We stay calm and wait for whoever shows up first. Achewillow is a small town. The kind of town where one can expect, after a few years, to know everyone else's name and business. In fact, it's a one coffee shop town, which, in a province like Quebec or a state like Vermont, says a lot. There should be at least one Tim Hortons here somewhere, but no, my place is the only game in town. Despite all that, I remain bothered that I know the 911 dispatcher by name, that I tapped the numbers on my phone and already knew what voice would answer. This isn't normal. This is Achewillow. I start, but hesitate and start again. They're going to ask you a lot of uncomfortable questions. Stephane nods, his eyes still riveted on Nancy. He knows not to approach her, not to touch her. He knows he's done all he could and has contaminated the scene too much already. His body, however, screams of his desire to go to her, to try and do more. I can see it in the pulsing tension of his muscles and in how his right foot is never fully on the ground. Meanwhile, Nancy stares back at us from her place on the couch. She made it home after all, assuming she called Stephane's apartment home. It's difficult at first to expect foul play. The living room, which she had claimed as her own, was already messy, and it would be hard to know if there had been a struggle. Her position, sitting down on the couch as if she were getting ready to watch television, seems almost natural, except for a slight slump to her side. She's dressed as I expected her to be, as she was that day I found her in the alley behind the Achewillow. Thick black jeans a size too big, a worn wool jacket over a flannel shirt over a black t-shirt, each layer showing through the unbuttoned layer above. Her long, dirty blonde hair looks slick with sweat, her chest is stained with blood, and her cheeks are streaked with dry tears. The timid lights of the kitchen, the only lights we dare flip on, pull the whites of her eyes, the white of her teeth, and the white of her ribs, forcing them to stand out in the shadows. If I were to venture a guess, playing a different kind of detective while standing at the threshold of Stephane's home, I'd say that her heart exploded forth from her breast. Yet, there is no pool of blood under her or chunks of any organ on the paper-covered coffee table. She didn't die here. At least, I don't think she did. They're going to think you did this, I continue, every word a fresh twist of the knife in the wound of Stephane's grief. I hate to do this to him, but he has to be warned. It's normal. This is your home. You were the last one to see her alive. But they will try to rattle you, to catch you off guard. They'll try to hurt you to get the answers they want. You have to remember that it's not malice. They're just doing their jobs. You understand? He nods again, the tendons in his neck stretching with the effort. Is this what it looks like when Stephane is angry? Scared? I expect him to take out his phone and take down what I'm telling him, making notes so all the important bullet points are readily available to him when he needs them. We stand there in silence a while longer. Every second, I expect to hear the sirens of an ambulance or police car. Any kind of first responder would do. Anything to break this silence. Instead, it's Stephane's throat contracting as he swallows a mouthful of dry air before speaking. She was going to get a job, he mumbles, his words struggling to get out. Get a job and get her own place. That was the plan. I look at him, not sure what I should do. In a perfect world, there would be a way for me to get him some tea or a slice of pie. I just don't have the words for what he's going through. That's not how I communicate. Despite having lived through similar experiences, this isn't the time to share notes. This isn't the kind of thing where being relatable would be of any help. But I can imagine a hot drink and a cookie doing the trick. She didn't want to date or anything, not while living here, not while she owed me. When I first hired Stephane, I cherished how little I knew about him. The sweet, cold distance of an employer and their employee was exactly the dynamic I needed so I would get accustomed to the role. After all, it's difficult enough ordering people around. Balancing that with a friendship would have been impossible. So I kept a calculated distance from Stephane, and he was a blissfully private individual. Until lately. Until now. It would have been too transactional otherwise, and Nancy cherishes... He interrupts himself, for the first time averting his eyes from the corpse on the couch. And Nancy cherished her freedom above her own life. The air between us, as Stephane looks down on me with barely contained tears, is almost thick enough to touch. My lips part, then close, then part again. A series of aborted attempts to fill that air with words of comfort for which I don't have the recipe. Thankfully, it's the cracking of wood under the pressure of careful footsteps that break the silence. Sensible loafers climbing up the steps as the front door to Clotho's tower slowly swings shut. Bonjour. The calm but tired voice of Detective Lemore echoes up the stairwell. Before he even rounded the corner, I could almost hear the rustling of the hem of his cardigan rubbing on the corduroy of his pants. Detective Lemore? I call out, sounding perhaps a little more desperate than I would have otherwise wanted. Ah, Mademoiselle Dufour. La pomme ne tombe pas bien loin de l'arbre, eh? He's just as he's always been, and looks as he always looks. Statues have been less consistent in their attire and attitude than Detective Lemore. He adjusts his wire-rimmed glasses the moment he lays eyes on Stephane and me, as if to confirm what he's seeing. I'm sorry if I fall short of expectations, but I'm just here to support my friend. I reach to take Stephane's hand. He's the one who found the body. And the principal resident of this apartment, Lemore concludes, taking out a worn spiral notepad and disposable pen. Stephane nods, watching the detective as one would track a snake through tall grass. He's not wrong to do so. Lemore is shrewd and professional. Unlike his American counterpart, Detective Wilson, he makes no game of his profession. No part of him is looking for an action sequence or a chase scene. He's not playing a character or putting any affectation on display. Lemore is to crime what I am to cuisine. First corpse? He asks as he steps up to Stephane. The words are callous, but the tone is empathetic. All his question gets in reply is another nod. Lemore seems to understand that this is about as much as he'll get from my employee for the moment. Don't worry, son, he says with a surprising amount of compassion. The first few hours are the worst. Without further question, the detective walks into the apartment. With the tip of his pen, he flicks the last few switches near the door, turning all the lights on. For the first time since arriving, I see Nancy on full display. The blood, the open wound in her chest, but mostly the look on her face. Now that I can see it clearly, her expression transports me back almost 2 years in the past. It's Clara Payne all over again. There, in those eyes, I see what her last moments must have been like. I get it now. The old legend that says the last thing someone sees is forever burned into their eyes. It's almost true. Not like a photograph burnt onto the negative of the dead's retina, but rather a poem written in their features that captures a final thought and emotion. For Nancy, It's not as simple as the fear and pain I saw in Clara. There's so much confusion there mixed in with the terror. Her expression is a marble cake of too many flavors. What stands out the most, however, is that in there, swirling between the vanilla and chocolate and caramel, all tastes that work well together, is a strange invader, as if someone had blended in a subtle amount of pickle cake into the batter. Right there, in the curve of her lip. Relief. You waited for me? In almost any other circumstances, the look of shock on Stephane's face would have been the highlight of my week. This is a man who personifies phlegmatic. The way I think of it, his personality can be summed up with the word efficient. No more, no less. Whenever anyone is capable of pulling an emotion out of him, we talk about it for days. It's just not the right time for this sort of lighthearted levity. Stephane is hurting. Achewillow is bleeding again. Of course not, I answer, attempting some mirth through honesty. I have a coffee shop to run, but I came as soon as I could close down without pissing off too many people. He shrugs his understanding, unable or unwilling to find the words otherwise. I don't think I've ever seen him this exhausted. And who could blame him? It's past 3 a.m, and he's been there for over 12 hours. I bet not a minute of it was pleasant either. The police station here on the Canadian side of Achewillow isn't what I would call modern. It's the template of a small town station. It shares half the building with the doctor's office and drugstore. There are only 3 parking spaces dedicated to the officers and their cruisers, and almost no window to break the dark brown brick facade of the structure. I've never been inside, and yet, despite the quaint appearance, I know in my bones that everything about this place is more up-to-date than on the U.S. side. Are you okay? He sniffs loudly, looking around at the night. Moths are gathering around the street lamps where they'll get picked up by waiting spider webs. There's a puddle next to the intersection, though there hasn't been any rain in days. All these things grab Stephane's interest for a fraction of a second as he searches the street for an answer. No. He looks down at his feet and notices the laces of his black sneakers are untied. With a heavy sigh, he crouches down to correct the issue, a convenient way to avoid looking at me. You were right, he explains. They thought I did it. They still think I did it. I did my best to explain it wasn't, that I would never, but they kept putting words in my mouth or twisting what I said. Was it like that? Was it like what? It's my turn to look around, avoiding eye contact as I try to avoid the question. I know where he's going, though. I didn't know Stephane at the time, but few people in Achewillow haven't heard of how I found the body of Clara Payne, only a day after another girl was found dead behind the cafe. He finishes with his sneakers and stands up, looking at me at last. His small, sunken eyes, couched in swollen lids, quietly beg of me not to play coy. It's my turn to sigh. Right, yeah, it was the same thing. Except I was tricked, really, into going to the U.S. side with Detective Wilson. I chuckle. Hell, I'd probably still be there if it wasn't for Helen Edna. Notary public, he finishes. Yeah. We start walking. I'm not sure where. Stephane sticks his hands in the pockets of his hoodie. Mine just hang by my side where the right one finds my Olivia purse. I was lucky, though, I continue. Wilson already had a favorite suspect in mind. He was convinced Gulliver was the one killing those poor girls. He just wanted me to corroborate his suspicions, to help with the case. And frankly, I almost did. But it wasn't him. Of course not. I almost laugh. Now that I know Gulliver better, I can't even imagine him lifting a finger against anyone. Oh, I'm sure that if he needed to crack a skull or two in defense of his friends, he'd be more than capable. But as it stands, my oversized friend is more likely to destroy a plate of brownies than he is a random stranger. So, Stephane starts, hesitating a little in his unique manner. Who was it? A hunger demon. That would be the correct answer, the truth. And Stephane wouldn't be the first person I told about the weird little secrets I've learned since moving to Achewillow. I've shared them with Thomas Sinclair, for crying out loud, and Annabelle has been obsessed with the idea of food as witchcraft ever since she learned of its existence. But Stephane is special. He's that little daily dose of normalcy that I keep around the cafe as an anchor to my own sanity. I don't want him to know about witches and demons and ghosts, not because I fear he won't believe me, but because I don't want him to. He's my pet skeptic. I don't know, I lie. Wilson said he was sure his guy had left town, but he wouldn't go into the details. And Lamore thinks it might be the same guy. I've lied to people. I've lied to my parents, of course, and I've lied to my teachers. I've lied to so many people since taking over the cafe, always to protect the secrets of the Dufours. I've had to lie through my teeth to protect Fred and Petunia's disappearance last fall. But never have I felt the physical demand of a lie as much as I did trying to hide my surprise. Never have I been so conscious of my body language and facial expression, making sure I didn't miss a step or contort my features reacting to Stephane's words. And yet, despite all that, I don't think I succeeded. He thinks the murderer's back? My question is as matter-of-fact as I can make it. I mix in nonchalance with a little curiosity and a dash of concern, but there's something wrong with the way I bake it together. No, he says, stopping to look at me, concern etched deeply onto his features. He thinks the killer never left. He thinks the killer is me. A shiver like cold liquid is flowing down my spine. I could deal with Wilson going on another flight of fancy and indulging in whatever suspicions he might entertain. Wilson is a caricature of a man. I've no doubt that he's a competent detective, but I have leverage on him. Well, Helen has leverage on him, but I do know more about the goings-on of Achewillow than he does, and that's something I could use against him. Lamore is a pie of a completely different filling. He's old and methodical and shrewd. Unlike Wilson, he's never let on how little or how much he knows about Achewillow at night. He's old enough to have known Doris in her prime and smart enough to listen when others would talk. If Lamore has indeed decided that Stephane is the killer behind all of the dead girls of Achewillow for the last 2 years, it's going to take a lot more to throw him off the scent than it did Wilson. Did he say that? Not in so many words, Stephane answers, picking up our walk. He wouldn't have let me go if he did, but he didn't leave much room for doubt either. He asked me for alibis going back 2 years and told me not to leave town. I bet I'll be seeing cops at every corner until this is resolved, or until they arrest me. There's a fatalistic tinge to that last sentence, the or of it being almost silent, allowing for the certainty of every other word to weigh in instead. To Stephane, it seems less a matter of if as it is a matter of when. He didn't do it, though. I know that. I'm not relying solely on my judgment of character either. History has shown that that's not one of my strong suits. It's how Nancy was killed. I shiver to contemplate the thought, but the wound in her chest wasn't anything I could imagine a person capable of. It looked like the damage came from inside of her. Her chest was like a lava cake that cracked and leaked fudge from the wound. How does Lamore explain how Stephane did that? No point in waiting to find out. Well, I start, injecting as much optimism as I can into my words. We just need to beat him to the punch, then. I get a laugh. It's a nervous giggle and not one with very much conviction to prop it up, but it's there. A shaking in his shoulders tells me it's genuine, though, so I'll take it. We're not detectives, Miriam, he explains. We don't have the resources or the manpower at Lamore's disposal. Isn't the best we can hope for that the evidence points away from me and that they find the real killer? It would be, if we were anywhere but Achewillow. I don't know if this makes any sense to Stephane. He was born here and raised here. This is his hometown, and while there's no doubt in my mind about how strange the place is, I don't know that it would register to someone steeped in the weird and wonderful since birth. And, I continue, it's not like we have no resources at all. We know people who can help. I'm sure we can at least take the suspicions off of you. From there, Lamore can take his investigation where it needs to go. This isn't even just for you either, Stephane. As long as the good detective focuses his efforts in your direction, he's not putting that energy into finding the real culprit. We're doing this to prevent more deaths. And to get justice for Nancy, he concludes, straightening his back. I think he's warming to the idea. Fine. Where do we start? I allow myself a satisfied smile. Right now, at nearly 4 in the morning and with a shift starting in a couple hours, it's a strained stretching of my lips, but it will do. Right now, we start by finding you a place to stay. I challenge anyone who might find my solutions to be inappropriate and unimaginative to be half as creative at 4 in the morning. Finding a place for Stephane to sleep ended with the most college answer to the problem. I gave him my couch. It goes against my personal policies to invite people to my place. Maybe I haven't quite washed off the stains of the previous occupant from the walls and floors. Maybe having to share my dining room in the cafe with anyone and everyone all day makes me long for a place unsoiled by the touch of others. Maybe I'm just a few cats away from achieving my true form and becoming a recluse, like Helmut Hans. It doesn't matter what the answer is. I haven't had a visitor to my apartment since Agnes was in town, an eternity ago. It's not easy for me to open the door to Stephane because of that wall I've built between my life as an employer and my life as a friend. The door of my home seems like a hole in that wall, allowing transit from one world to the other. Fortunately, through a harmonious marriage of Stephane's natural pragmatism, his pathological decorum, and the harrowing day he suffered, the guy might as well be a walking corpse. There's no question, comment, or observation about my living conditions out of him. Not that my life should suffer much under his scrutiny. Apart from having the home of a woman 4 times my age, nothing stands out of the ordinary. There are a lot of doilies on the furniture and needlepoint on the walls, but these are holdovers from Doris's day. I keep the place neat, though it's a coin toss whether the kitchen will be as impeccable as a surgery room or a catastrophic mess. Tonight, the odds were in my favor. When I get up, Stephane is still asleep on the couch. He looks exactly how you'd expect someone pretending to sleep to be. His position is that of a cartoon character, on his back with the comforter tucked under his arms, which are laid neatly at his sides. His clothes are folded into a tidy pile balanced atop his sneakers. He looks uncomfortable, and I can't decide if it's because of his position, restless sleep, or if it's just how Stephane looks when he slumbers. I step into a morning barely older than the one I abandoned a few hours ago. The streets are a little more quiet and the air a little more humid. If I look to the east and focus hard, I can see that a deep purple is pushing its way through the darkness, struggling to herald the coming sun. I unlock the Achewillow and go through the motions of preparing things for the day. Everything I do is on automatic pilot, leaning hard on my years of experience cooking and baking to take me through the next few hours. If I can make it to the opening, I can let the rhythm of the day carry me through. As long as I don't fall asleep, face first in a bowl of batter and drown before then. It's an unremarkable day, which, in and of itself, is a remarkable thing. I keep expecting to see Detective Lamore drop by to check in on Stephane, or maybe Aaron Wilson might stop for a coffee and I could ask him for help. No such luck. None of my regulars show up either. I knew that Olivia had business for the day, but I was hoping Annabelle would come study so I could distract her with this brand new mystery. At the very least, I thought Gulliver would be by, as is his habit on Fridays. But lunchtime came and went without the shadow of his truck to obscure my windows. Normally, I'd be a little paranoid about the situation. But currently, as it pertains to strange occurrences, my dance card is full. What are you doing here? I ask Stephane as he stumbles into the cafe. He looks surprised, perhaps even insulted by the question. As soon as I see the expression on his face, I know why. I have a shift, he answers, as unemotional as a guy who didn't spend half a night in an interrogation room would be. No point in arguing that it was an unspoken agreement that he would not work a shift today. I handled the cafe on my own for months before hiring Stephane, and I can close the place down for an afternoon if I need to. Watching him pick up and tie his apron around his waist, I decide that working could be his coping mechanism. Behind that statue's facade is a man mourning the loss of a close friend and reeling from the weight of the justice system pressing down on him. I could force him to take the day off, but then what? Where does he go? His apartment is probably still off limits, and anywhere else he could go would only be to stew in his own misery. I let him settle in while I pilfer through the display case, grabbing a specimen of every cookie, cake, pastry, and strudel and stuffing them into a box. An Achewillow sampler is what I call it in the back of my mind. The only thing I don't bother to include is a croissant. Stephane's first customer of the afternoon is Vicky Paramore again. I let my eyes linger, maybe a moment too long on her. She notices and nods with a smile full of perfect teeth. I don't know if it's the season's weather, but there's something about her skin tone and the shine in her hair that stands out these days. Or maybe I'm just getting a little lonely since Agnes left. "Hungry?" Vicky asks, nudging her chin at my box of sweets and treats. The way she says it, no one would mistake her words for anything but the good-natured joke it is. "Nah," I answer, a smile of my own. I'm trying to impress someone. I don't want to have to explain myself to Vicky further, because if I have to give her a reason for what I'm about to do, then that reason has to make sense to me too. I don't know that I'm able to do that right now. The whole point of this exercise is to surf on the edge of my exhaustion and indulge my weirdest insecurities without the burden of self-awareness. Don't ruin that for me, Vicky. "Well, if anything'll do it," she laughs. And that's it. Stephane to the rescue with a cup of green tea to break the conversation. With a grateful nod in his direction, I'm off on my fool's errand. It's a short walk to Pearls of Wisdom. I cringe at the name. Remembering the logo makes me smile. Say what she might about my croissant, I'll always have that over Ophelia. The Achewillow Cafe has class. As I get closer, I realize that I should, by now, be able to see the front of the little knitting store. The glass door and the wood-carved logo of the wool ball cat should be right there, but instead they're obscured by a huge trailer truck. One with a bright red cab, the words Eddie G in black vinyl letters on the door. Gulliver. I see him now, stepping out of the back of the truck, a stack of brown moving boxes in his arms. Like tree trunks, dark and massive, his biceps pulse with the effort. It's not a particularly warm day, yet he decided to do this shirtless, and I'm not sure he realizes the effect it's having on the local population. Mother, that man is just a pile of muscles, isn't he? A woman pushing a stroller watches, mouth agape, as Gulliver carries his load through the door of the knitting shop. Her husband, standing dutifully at her side, nods in either admiration, understanding, or both. I swear, traffic is slowed down more by his sweaty skin than it is by his huge truck taking up a whole lane. And holding the door for him, her face split side to side by a smile so bright it belongs in a toothpaste ad, is Ophelia. I don't know if this is what she ordered when she asked Gulliver to help her move a few things into her shop, but she's definitely glad for the bonus content. I get closer, trying to come up with something clever and sufficiently familiar and derisive to say. I want something cute and friendly that won't offend Gulliver so much that it makes things awkward, but I want to draw a clear portrait of him as my dear and long-term friend. Let's not pretend this isn't a moment for me to plant my flag into Achewillow and show Ophelia that it doesn't matter what she thinks of my croissant, and it doesn't matter that she managed to banish the ghost of Gary Remington. What's important is that I was here first, and I'm the great-grandniece of Doris Dufour. This is my turf. I think I've got the perfect one-liner. I go around the truck and watch. Ophelia holds the door again for Gulliver to go out and get another package. His remarkable physique on display for the whole world to see in a show that is almost embarrassing. As he's just about to pass the threshold of the door, he stops. Ophelia says something that sends him laughing in that particular way of his, throat bare as he looks to the sky with his mouth wide open. Then, once he's recovered, he smiles, bends down, and kisses her, right on the lips. What the Achewillow is written by J.F. Dubow and narrated and produced by me, Amy Frost. If you enjoyed this podcast and would like to hear more, please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts or your preferred podcast platform. Want to support the show? Buy us a coffee. Go to ko-fi.com/Achewillow to donate. Achewillow has a Patreon. Visit patreon.com/Achewillow for details. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram under the username Achewillow.